Hey, welcome to a new video. The death penalty remains one of the most controversial aspects of criminal justice, with countries applying it in vastly different ways. While some nations have abolished it entirely, others continue to impose it for certain crimes. The experience of death row varies greatly depending on the location, legal system, and cultural views on justice and punishment. Today, we'll take you on a look at what death row looks like around the world.
Are you new to this channel? Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And before we start, also like the video. Number 20.
As of 2023, approximately 2,500 individuals are on death row in the United States. Currently, 24 states actively enforce the death penalty, while 23 states in the District of Columbia have abolished it. The death penalty is typically reserved for capital offenses, such as murder, high treason, espionage, and certain cases of child abuse. The primary methods of execution include lethal injection, the most commonly used method, involving the administration of a series of drugs to induce death; electrocution, the use of the electric chair to deliver fatal shocks; gas chamber, involves the inhalation of poisonous gas; and firing squad, an alternative method permitted in some states. Death row inmates usually spend their final evenings in solitary confinement, often with limited phone contact with family or friends. Visits are strictly regulated, but close family members may sometimes be allowed to see the inmate before execution. Many prisoners are given the option to choose a last meal, selecting from a variety of foods within the prison regulations. Notable last meal requests include Ted Bundy, the infamous serial killer, opted for a simple meal of steak, eggs, and a baked potato, along with a cup of coffee. John Wayne Gacy, convicted of murdering 33 young men, he requested a bucket of KFC fried chicken, french fries, and a pound of strawberries. Executions are often witnessed by a select group, including the victim's family, the inmate's family, media representatives, and legal officials. The time spent on death row varies widely, with many inmates waiting 10 to 20 years or more due to the lengthy appeals and legal proceedings.
Number 19.
China's prosecution system has an exceptionally high conviction rate of around 99%, leading to thousands of death sentences each year. The primary execution methods in China are firing squad and lethal injections. Lethal injections, legalized in the 1990s, are often administered in state-run mobile execution vans. In this process, condemned prisoners are reportedly secured to a table inside a specially equipped van, where the lethal injection is administered. There are significant concerns regarding organ harvesting from executed prisoners, as their organs are frequently used for medical and scientific purposes without their consent. Amnesty International has identified China as the world's leading executor, with the number of executions believed to far exceed the combined total of all other countries. Lethal injections have become the preferred method in China due to lower costs and the ability to conduct executions more discreetly. The use of mobile execution vans streamlines the process, eliminating the need to transport inmates to prisons. However, the operations of these vehicles remain shrouded in secrecy, with little transparency about the victims, who are often quickly tried and executed.
Number 18.
Each year, Iranian authorities execute hundreds of people, according to reports from Iran Human Rights and other human rights organizations. Many death row inmates face significant legal challenges, often being denied access to a lawyer after their arrest. This results in unfair trials, where convictions are frequently based on confessions obtained through torture. Recently, the Rajai Shah prison has seen an increase in solitary confinement for death row inmates before execution, making it harder to understand their final hours. Inmates are typically shackled at both hands and feet to prevent self-harm or disturbances during transport. The process often involves moving condemned prisoners into isolation on Saturday, with executions carried out on Wednesday. During solitary confinement, prisoners receive only government-provided meals, which are often considered inedible. In regular prison sections, inmates are allowed to cook for themselves, leading many to discard the state-provided food. The final visit with families described as an especially harrowing experience, often considered more painful than the execution itself.
Number 17.
The treatment of death row prisoners in Saudi Arabia remains shrouded in secrecy. However, we do know the number of executions last year. In 2024, Saudi authorities carried out 198 executions, the highest number since 1990. Despite promises to limit the use of capital punishment, Saudi Arabia has increased executions, frequently ignoring international standards for fair trials and due process. Notably, drug-related executions have risen sharply. Additionally, the Saudi government has used the death penalty as a tool to silence political dissent, targeting citizens from the Shiite minority who participated in anti-government protests between 2011 and 2013. Between May and June 2024, Saudi authorities also executed 3 foreign nationals from Syria and Nigeria. The rise in executions, particularly for drug offenses and political dissent, stands in stark contrast to the kingdom's previous pledges to limit capital punishment. The international community has expressed deep concern over Saudi Arabia's disregard for human rights and the rule of law in its use of the death penalty.
Number 16.
The death penalty in Egypt is a complex and multifaceted issue, shaped by legal frameworks, execution methods, prison conditions, and demographic factors. Egypt ranks among the top 5 countries with the highest number of executions worldwide. Between 2018 and 2020, Egypt carried out at least 241 executions, with a peak of 152 in 2020, the highest in its history. Capital offenses in Egypt include a range of crimes, such as murder, terrorism-related activities, and crimes against state security. The primary method of execution for civilians is hanging, while military personnel sentenced to death are typically executed by firing squad. Detailed info about death row conditions in Egypt is scarce. However, reports suggest that prisoners endure prolonged periods of isolation. There's also great uncertainty about execution dates, and inmates have limited access to the outside world, including minimal contact with family and legal counsel. These conditions are often described as inhumane, falling under what is known as the death row phenomenon. Since Egypt is a signatory to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, suspects must be at least 18 years old at the time of the crime to be eligible for the death penalty.
Number 15.
Over the past 2 decades, nearly 300 individuals have been placed on death row in Indonesia, with approximately 186 convicted for drug-related offenses. Between 2013 and 2016, the country executed 23 people, following an unofficial moratorium in previous years. The primary method of execution in Indonesia is firing squad. Prisoners are typically given at least 72 hours notice of their execution date, and then placed in solitary confinement. On the scheduled day, they are transported to a remote location, where a 12-person firing squad carries out the execution. The condemned individual may choose to sit or stand and is blindfolded. Interviews with lawyers revealed that in 2015, executed prisoners were held together in a single room in the days leading up to their execution. In new Indonesian criminal code, enacted in 2023, it introduces a 10-year probation period for death row inmates who show remorse and good behavior, potentially allowing their sentence to be commuted to life imprisonment.
Number 14.
Mauritania currently has a moratorium on executions, but information about death row prisoners remains scarce. These inmates are detained under the same conditions as the general prison population, and due to overcrowding, isolation is not feasible. Most death row inmates are housed in Bur Mogret, a remote desert facility far from their families and legal aid organizations. Few lawyers are willing to take on these cases, as they face threats and intimidation. Mauritanian law prohibits the execution of children under 16, but minors aged 16 to 18 can still be sentenced to death. Legally, death row inmates must be placed in special cells and monitored 24/7 to prevent escape. As of 2017, the daily food and hygiene allowance for prisoners was less than $1 per person, an amount that had not been adjusted for over a decade. Some inmates rely on rare family visits to receive additional food.
Number 13.
Belarus is the only country in Europe that still enforces the death penalty, and inmates on death row live in constant uncertainty about their fate. Prisoners are never informed in advance of their execution date, and when it occurs, the event is treated as a state secret. It's estimated that since Belarus gained independence in 1991, more than 300 executions have been carried out. Most individuals sentenced to death are convicted of aggravated murder and are detained in the high-security units of the Petrol Detention Center 1. This facility is housed in a partially collapsed 19th century castle in central Minsk, where access for activists and journalists is severely restricted. According to a former prisoner employee, inmates are not allowed to sit or lie down on their beds outside of designated sleep hours. Instead, they are forced to walk in circles inside their cells. Their right to send and receive letters is often ignored, and visits are highly restricted. Aside from lawyers, only close family members are allowed 1 visit per month. Executions take place in a special room, accessible only to authorized personnel. Prisoners are blindfolded before being taken to this location. Families are often not informed until weeks or months later, typically when they receive a box containing the inmate's personal belongings. The bodies are never returned to the families, and the locations of burial sites remain a strict state secret.
Number 12.
The Iraqi government has dramatically increased the scale and speed of unlawful executions in 2024. In January, Human Rights Watch reported at least 150 prisoners in Nasiriyah Central Prison were on the verge of being executed without warning. It's estimated that around 8,000 individuals are currently on death row in Iraq. The government does not release official execution statistics and has refused multiple requests for transparency. A relative of an executed inmate stated that the death certificate listed execution as the cause of death. Yet there was no visible signs on the body to support this. This raised doubts about the true nature of these deaths. Weeks after the funeral, armed men from Iraq's state security forces were seen monitoring the grave, as well as harassing family members. The The family suspects this was an effort to prevent them from exhuming the body for an independent autopsy, as no official autopsy records were provided.
Number 11.
Singapore enforces the death penalty for a limited number of crimes, mainly premeditated murder and large-scale drug trafficking. The government emphasizes that capital punishment is applied sparingly and only for the most severe offenses. Between 1991 and 2004, more than 400 prisoners were executed in Singapore, giving the city-state one of the highest execution rates per capita in the world during that period. In Singapore, the death penalty is mandatory for individuals convicted of trafficking specific amounts of regulated substances. The standard execution method is hanging, carried out at Changi Prison. These executions typically occur early on Friday mornings. The exact protocols regarding final visits, last meals, and pre-execution procedures are not publicly disclosed. As of March 2022, there were 62 inmates on death row in Singapore. Under Singaporean law, a person must be at least 18 years old at the time of the offense to be eligible for the death penalty.
Number 10.
Japanese law requires the Minister of Justice to approve and schedule an execution within 6 months of a final death sentence. However, in reality, prisoners spend an average of 15 years on death row, while their cases undergo further reviews. As of 2023, 106 inmates were awaiting execution, and 3 prisoners died in custody that year. The most recent execution in Japan took place on July 26, 2022, when Tomohiro Kato was hanged for killing 7 people during a 2008 attack in Tokyo. Japan enforces strict secrecy around its execution procedures. Death row prisoners are held in solitary confinement, under 24/7 surveillance. Inmates are informed only 1 hour before execution, meaning their families and lawyers are not notified until after the execution has already taken place.
Number 9.
In Thailand, drug-related offenses are punishable by death, and women on death row are disproportionately sentenced for these crimes. Overcrowding and limited resources in Thai prisons contribute to harsh detention conditions. Unlike the general prison population, death row inmates are excluded from work programs and rehabilitation services. As of March 2018, there were 510 prisoners on death row, with more than half convicted of drug offenses. Historically, executions in Thailand were carried out by firing squads, but in October 2003, the country switched to lethal injection as the sole method of execution. Thai prisons are notoriously overcrowded and understaffed, leading to substandard living conditions. There's little public documentation regarding death row inmates' final moments, including phone calls, visits, meals, or witnesses at executions. Thai law allows prisoners to submit a royal clemency petition within 60 days of a Supreme Court death sentence. The king has unlimited time to deliberate on these requests, effectively postponing executions during this period. There's no publicly available information on age requirements for the death penalty in Thailand.
Number 8.
Pakistan has one of the strictest death penalty systems in the world, accounting for 26% of the global death row population. As of 2024, there are 6,161 prisoners on death row, an increase from 6,039 in 2023. Since 2004, Pakistan has issued at least 4,500 death sentences, averaging 1 per day. While no executions have been carried out since December 2019, Pakistan remains one of the largest users of capital punishment, with more than 31 crimes carrying the death penalty. Due to overcrowding, prisoners in some facilities are crammed into cells smaller than 26 feet or 8 square meters, leading to a high incidence of disease such as tuberculosis, scabies, and gastrointestinal disorders. Death row inmates are moved to new cells daily and kept under constant surveillance. They're allowed 1 hour outside their cell per day, during which they must remain shackled. Activity options are limited, although some prisoners are allowed to pursue educational qualifications. Those with Supreme Court confirmed death sentences can only interact with the others through their cell bars. Family and legal visits occur under strict supervision, compromising confidentiality and privacy. The average time between sentencing and execution is approximately 11 years. Once executed, the body's returned to the family. If unclaimed, it's buried in the prison cemetery.
Number 7.
Yemen has one of the highest execution rates per capita in the world, and public executions are common. Under Houthi control in northern Yemen, the number of death sentences has significantly increased. In May 2024, the Houthi-run court sentenced 44 individuals to death for alleged collaboration with the Saudi-led coalition. Details about death row conditions and final moments remain poorly documented. The last officially recorded execution of a minor in Yemen occurred on July 21, 1993, when 13-year-old Nasir and 3 others were executed for serious crimes. Following this execution, Yemen's parliament amended the penal code for the next year, banning the death penalty for individuals under 18 at the time of their offense.
Number 6.
The death penalty remains legal in Botswana, primarily used for murder under aggravated circumstances. However, Botswana's constitution guarantees the right to life, making it the only country in southern Africa that still actively enforces capital punishment. One notable case involved Mariette Bosch, a South African woman sentenced to death in 1999 for murdering the wife of her lover. She was executed 2 years later, becoming the fourth woman executed since Botswana's independence in 1966, and one of the few white women to be executed in Africa. Her execution was carried out in secrecy, and her family was not informed. There's also been instances where prisoners were executed without the legally required 24-hour notice. In one case, the mother of an inmate and his lawyer were denied access to him the day before his execution. They only learned of his death via a radio announcement. The Botswana government subsequently refused to return the body to the family for burial.
Number 5.
In Somalia, legally sanctioned executions are carried out by firing squads. The country recognizes Sharia law and Islamic courts alongside civil law, both of which have the authority to order executions by beheading or even stoning. Since the early 21st century, non-state militias have also conducted extrajudicial executions, often without official approval, amid ongoing instability and conflict. In August 2024, authorities in Puntland, a semi-autonomous region of Somalia, executed 4 children. They were accused of committing crimes while under the age of 18, and allegedly being affiliated with an armed group opposing the government. These executions were carried out, despite Somalia being a signatory to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, making this a deeply troubling case.
Number 4.
In the United Arab Emirates, UAE, various crimes are punishable by death, with firing squad being the only permitted execution method. The UAE legal system enforces the death penalty for serious crimes, including murder, terrorism, espionage, and other severe offenses threatening national security. Both foreign nationals and UAE residents have been executed for various crimes. As of 2023, the last known execution in the UAE took place in 2017. Key aspects of the legal process in the UAE include: confessions are often obtained without a lawyer present. There's no bail system for serious crimes, and jury trials do not exist in the UAE's legal framework.
Number 3.
In India, most death sentences are commuted to life imprisonment during the judicial processes, which can take several years due to lengthy court proceedings. Limited resources for food, hygiene, and healthcare contribute to harsh prison conditions. The remote locations of prisons, high transportation costs, and financial hardships often make it difficult for families to visit inmates, leading to infrequent or impossible family contact. Between 2019 and 2020, the number of death sentences declined from 103 to 77. In 2018, lower courts issued 162 death sentences, the highest number in 19 years, while the law prohibits the execution of minors. 18 inmates sentenced in 2016 were later revealed to have been underage at the time of their crimes, a common issue due to a lack of official documentation. Many death row prisoners are held in solitary confinement inside special death barracks. Prisoners report being allowed to move freely for only 3 to 12 hours per day, depending on the prison. One prisoner stated that upon arrival, the chief warden showed him the gallows. Another reported seeing a photo of the gallows on a prison guard's phone. In a particularly disturbing practice, some guards have asked inmates to nominate them as executioners in their last wish, a task reportedly paid around $270.
Number 2.
In Vietnam, executions were historically carried out by 7 police officers, while prisoners were blindfolded and tied to stakes. However, in November 2011, this method was replaced with lethal injection. On July 1, 2016, Vietnam abolished the death penalty for 7 specific offenses, including disobeying orders and damaging national security projects. However, exceptions exist. People aged 75 and older and convicted officials who return illegal profits may be exempt from execution. The death penalty does not apply to juveniles, pregnant women, or women caring for children under 36 months old at the time of the crime or trial. Instead, their sentence is commuted to life imprisonment. Between August 6, 2013 and June 30, 2016, Vietnam executed 429 people. From July 2011 to June 2016, 1,134 people were sentenced to death. However, the current number of death row inmates is unknown.
Number 1.
The rise of Kim Jong-un as North Korea's supreme leader following the death of his father, Kim Jong-II, in December 2011 did not improve the country's severe human rights violations. North Korea systematically violates its citizens' rights, with the government banning organized political opposition, free press, civil society, and religious freedom. Arbitrary arrests, detentions without fair trials, and torture of prisoners are widespread. North Korea also enforces collective punishment, resulting in hundreds of thousands of people being enslaved in labor camps. The regime regularly carries out public executions for offenses including stealing state property, food hoarding, other so-called anti-socialist crimes. North Korea's criminal code prescribes the death penalty for broad offenses, including crimes against the state and crimes against the people. These vague definitions allow for widespread abuse. A 2007 amendment expanded the death penalty to many nonviolent crimes, including fraud and smuggling. Testimonies collected by Human Rights Watch in 2012 revealed shocking executions for seemingly minor crimes, such as stealing a metal wire and removing glass from a Kim Jong-il portrait. Additionally, people have been executed for helping others escape across the North Korean-China border. Would you ever want to see a death row facility from the inside? Let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos we've made, click one on the screen or take a look at the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.